So here we are. The stage is set. Thank you, Damian, for the introduction and pulling me into this panel with a lot of brain power, which puts me a little bit under pressure, I have to say. But it is a very interesting topic, as you can see, the Playbook for Success. What does that mean? We talk about sports leadership, management, education. And as you will also see and understand from the conversation, it is a very diverse topic. So the first challenge will be to sort of define what we're talking about. And as Martin told me yesterday, one way of doing that is looking at education for students who want to work in sports. Another one is for executives that already work in sports to further develop themselves. And thirdly, last but not least, it's about athletes and their careers, their first, second, third career, however you want to define it. With Damjan Rudesh, we have a great example, as he already said, of a high-performance athlete that is making great ways into the second part of his life. He's closely linked to Dino Ruta and Bocconi, for instance. But as we will hear, it's not always that rosy and glory and easy also, but there's a lot of great stories as well. The panel is, and let me start with the introduction, the panel itself is already extremely global. I mean, if you look at it here, you have two professors here, so from leading business schools in the world. We have Martin from the Stockholm School of Economics, Dino from Bocconi Business School in Milan, leaders in their field. Then, as I move to the right, we have Virgil Stanescu, who I was told yesterday in his illustrious basketball career, as you can see, he was certainly not a gymnast. He was a high-performance player, captain of the Romanian national team. And he also, in 2004, there are rumors, played a game against the young Damjan Rudesh somewhere. There's no proof, but it happened. But he will have a great story about career transition in particular. But we'll come to that from his own words. And last but certainly not least, we have an extremely senior representatives from a government level. With Mesna on my far right, who will talk about the fascinating story of building leadership competences and the sports industry in Saudi Arabia. Anyway, my challenge is not to speak too much myself, and I will open the floor asking each of you, and I will start with Mesna, ladies first, if you can briefly introduce yourself and also, in line with the topic here, give your perspective on this piece of education and how you define success. Mesna.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the kind invitation to talk today to everyone. It's our pleasure to be here. For my role, in Saudi Arabia, so I work overseas the educational arm of the Ministry of Sports, where is the responsible for learning and development and regulations. And through our also mandate, we oversee the human capability development for the KSA, which the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And through our work, we have a great vision, which is 2030 in Saudi Arabia. And part of it, of course, all the fields in the kingdom have different strategy that is cascaded a part of the vision. So this is brief about my work. I'm also personally previously worked in an academia. So I joined my colleagues. So I have an academic background. I was an associate professor in King Saud University, where I taught, and my specialties in public health and physical activity. It was a new major actually in the country, and was privileged to have this role for many years in the university. So now I moved to the industry where I oversees the human capability for the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mesna. Maybe just to quickly add on, you also explained to me yesterday that you are, of course, building excellence in the sport, not only on the field, but also in management, and that addresses a very young population in Saudi Arabia, very growing and future-oriented group, but also that you look to bring best-in-class professionals from outside Saudi into the mix, correct? Maybe you want to say something about it.
Yes, so we are a young country. So Saudi Arabia, the population, 70% of the population is under the age of 35. And the vision, 2030, is the center of the transformation. And we recognize the need for the human capability. And therefore, we have 3 pillars for this strategy, where we build the capability, we engage the local capability, and we attract a new talent, international talent. And this is how we link our local capability with the international capability to build the sport sector in specific with the human capability. And this is what we focus, and the center of actually the Vision 2030 is about the human. And our Crown Prince, when he announced the vision in 2016, the human was the center of it, and human capability is part of the success of this 2030 vision. So this is what I was telling you yesterday, and we are, really proud of what we are putting everything on the strategy that is centered around the human and the human capability.
Thank you. Very interesting and giving a lot of perspective, I think, also here for the audience, what is ahead. Virgil, coming to you, what is your angle on this topic, and what is your definition of success?
First of all, stereotypes. Just because I'm 208, nobody would say piano or violin. But yes, I played basketball for 20 years. But I also went to the education side of it. I graduated in management in States, in University of South Alabama. I did 2 master's degrees, one in Romania, one in UK. And now I'm having my own company. It's called Sports Hub, which has 2 directions. One is commercial, and we represent some athletes. We're part of their teams in the commercial side of the sport, in branding, partnerships, public appearances, and so on. And on the other side is a nonprofit that we help kids 14 to 18. Go Scholarship is a place where we help them stay educated and not be forced to take school or sport. It's school and sport. So we create a support system for young talent. Now, what's my take on success? Let me challenge you. How many of you want to have success? Just raise hands. Right? I know. Yeah, everybody. How many of you want to perform in what they do? Just raise hands. Same, pretty much everybody. So there are 2 different questions here, because success, we define our own success, right? So if life-work balance is a success, then that's our success. If I want to be a parent, that's my success. Performance is defined with KPIs. It's exterior. So it's not what we always go for, maybe, because you have to put in that type of work. So, success, personal success changes when you're tired, when it hurts, when your ankle breaks, or when, things happen. Then you say, okay, I'll do it again tomorrow, or we'll see. No, if it's not a firm contract with yourself, success changes. So my definition of success is to be aligned with what's your expectations of performance. because you cannot have life-work balance but be an Olympic champion. You know, so you have to understand what you need to put in to take out that. So it's easy. Just if I'm asking you again, would you say the same thing? Because my kid was born in Russia, one of them. The second one almost in Italy. I probably spent 2 Christmases home, 2 birthday parties outside the locker room. And I'm sure all the athletes here identify with that. But that's not my definition of success. You know, it's taking what you put in and be aligned with that, because that's healthy.
Thanks, Virgil. Very interesting. A lot of food for thought. I see also in the audience. We'll come back to some of that. And by the way, you're also an example. You told me yourself about a successful career transition with the help of a program that you went through, the timeout program at the time, which helped you.
Like I didn't pay for my education. So I got a scholarship in the States, in Romania, with the help of FIBA. I was in timeout program. That doesn't mean it came free. I put in a lot of time. So I dedicated a lot of time for my education, which it's pretty expensive.
Well, it paid off, and we'll hear more. Moving to the left, we're coming to the professors. We start up north in Stockholm. Martin, long time you worked in this moving industry of the sport business. What is your angle on the topic and your definition of success?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. I think the sports industry is in a really interesting crossroads right now. On the one hand, we have a lot of money coming in, both from the West and the East, if we think of a European perspective. On the other hand, sports is an industry or a sector where traditions and legacy needs to be preserved. So it's not like any other industry. When I started the Center for Sports and Business at the Stockholm School of Economics in 2015, my dean said, "Martin, you're the CFO guy of the Stockholm School of Economics. Don't take your hobby project too seriously." Now, 10 years later, he's like, "Sports, that's a global industry. It's really good that you're working on that." And to me, that's the key thing. How can I get my students, and I would say very similar students that Dino has at Bocconi, to really say, my first career choice is not to go to Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, Spotify, IKEA, H&M, whatever it might be. It is to really get a super job in sports. Because I think that's what's needed right now. I think sports needs to, on the one hand, realize the potential, but also step up a little bit and be a little bit more ambitious. So that's why I'm here, to really say, it's time for change.
Great. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll come back later to the topic why maybe a lot of young people would like to join, Real Madrid, Juventus, the NBA, the Olympic, the IOC. They would like to make that career, but for different reasons they don't get that opportunity. But that's for later on in the panel. Maybe in the meantime, moving to Dino, Bocconi, your angle on this topic with your experience in all 3 pillars and your measurement of success?
Thank you, Frank. First of all, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I founded the center in 2013, so Martin just copy and paste my idea. That's the first message. But beyond that, I think was kind of a joke, obviously. But also, in that moment, the reaction was exactly the same also at Bocconi. I was lucky that we had the FIFA Master, that is a leading program in Europe that started in 2001. So I was appointed a director there. And then in that moment, when I entered in the class, I realized, oh, wow, that's my future. One day, the editor of Sport Business Journal wanted to write a piece on my career. And we had a long interview. The day after, he called me and said, Dino, I need your authorization. I said, for what? It's kind of a simple story. No, I need the authorization of the title. can we write Dino Ruta, Closing the Gap Between Sport and Education? In that moment was another kind of moment where I realized what I wanted to do. Sometimes, people are able to capture in a better manner what is in our brain. And then I think that from that moment on, as a first job, I think I'm an ambassador of this kind of bringing education into sport. Second, I need to pay my bill, so I am also professor as Bocconi, so I lead some programs. To conclude my journey was a turning point. There are a couple of projects, because my interpretation of being ambassador, it's really in the international landscape. The main one, then maybe the second story I will tell later, is about when one student, a lady from Qatar, was in class, a FIFA master, and at the end of the first lecture, she said, "Professor, can I ask you a favor? Can we talk 2 minutes?" To be honest, in that moment, I didn't even know where Qatar was. We are talking about 2015. I knew that they had to organize the FIFA World Cup, but still now when I say I go to Qatar, many people say Dubai. So actually at that moment, even for me, was I didn't know Doha, Dubai, so it was kind of a black box, the Middle East. But she said, "Can I ask you a favor? Can we pick a little bit of your time and to have yourself in Doha for a while, because we need your approach, your vision." And then after a while, I started a project with them, and it was kind of a changing, because there was also, coming back to your point, what is my angle? My angle changed over the years. And today I'm lucky enough, because I'm able to teach in the United States, in New York, but also in the Middle East and in Europe. So different angles, just for one mission.
Thank you, Dino. We'll come back to the second story. You promised us that, so we're gonna hear about that, as well as also the how shall I say, the strike back from Martin about Bocconi and Stockholm. I'm sure we get that also. But let's move on to the second topic. As we said, just to structure this conversation: education, students, executives, and athletes. And as we are here in the festival, which is the brainchild of Damian Rudes, and we have mentioned his story and his ongoing story with the education, also with Matteo Zuretti here from the Players Association, who plays a big role in that. I would like to come to that specific pillar quickly for the entire panel, and I'll again go around, but I'll start with Virgil, because he's the most logical place to start. Let's say when it comes to athletes and business, former athletes in business, athletes transitioning into business, there's a lot of elements that come into play. You are a former high-performance athlete. You see a lot around them. What do you see as, and that's also for the rest of the panel, as maybe the specific assets, benefits, but also the pitfalls that you can see with high-performance athletes making that transition? And I know you cannot stereotype. There's different categories. There's different situations. But maybe you can try to give a bit your take on that piece: athletes, management, benefits, pitfalls.
Thank you, Frank, for that. I have a bad news and the good news. The bad news is that just because we're a dog and we know the dog's life, that doesn't make us veterinarian, So I think that just, let me put it in these words, just because you know how it is between the lines of the court, that doesn't make you a coach, that doesn't make you a president of a club, a manager, a president of a federation. We tend to translate the medal. Just because we take that world championship, Olympic championship, something, we translate it to the same line to a president of the club, ministry, or whatever. But we forgot about the process. Like what took me to get that medal, you know, all that practice, all that shots, the kicks, the weights, the whatever it took me to get to that point to be a performer. And to be a manager, you have to put in the same work. You know, you have to put in the hours of learning negotiations. You were talking about earlier about negotiations, about, you know, teams, how to form, norm, storm, perform. You know, the part that actually helps you to become a better manager. And now the good news. The good news is that I learned from sports more than anything else. And I'm an educated person. But sport taught me, you know, soft skills that became the hard skills of tomorrow. We know how to play in team. We know how to understand roles, process. Anything that, you know, companies are looking for and entrepreneurship, it's there. We just have to learn how to move it in different boxes. And if we call that formal education, you know, structure, if we call that informal education, we don't have time. You know, we don't, I have enough focus on practice or on something. You know, I would say, you know, I heard that it's too hard. Practice ain't easy. If you got to that level of athleticism, it was not easy. So this is not gonna be easy too. But of course, we need the system to help. So what I'm saying is that if you're able to translate that and put it in different boxes, you know, it's sky's the limit. And it's our choice or sported choice to look into this human resource as assets or as liabilities. Because if we don't educate athletes, if athletes are taking just talent in this, you know, and it's not the process of work, that we know how to do it because we did it all our lives. You know, talent doesn't bring you there. So just talent as a manager, I don't know how that is. I don't know how that looks. You know, so I think you have to shape yourself, your future self. Now, if you do it when you finish career, it's too late. Because you're gonna have to fill up the fridge tomorrow. You're gonna have to take your kids to the same kindergarten. You're gonna have to pay your car, your whatever, house, whatever. So you don't have the freedom to look in time. So take that before, and now there's so many ways you can do it. You don't have to think, okay, I don't have time because of practice, about going away. Okay, I'm not gonna do an MBA, but I have off-season. I have between, you know, in the bus rides, I have a lot of time that I can invest in me. Networking, like what you, Damien, you know, did here, it's an unbelievable platform. You know that if you use it right, with your name as an athlete, you can translate that to anything.
Thank you, Virgil. That's very inspirational. A lot of lessons there, I think, and different perspectives, and certainly to start when you're still on the court will also resonate with, I think, some of the things like NBPA.
We actually took that way early, like 14, 18, 20. You know, learn how to tell your story. Learn how to, you know, project yourself. Because basketball, if you asked me 15 years ago, I would tell you basketball is my life. And if basketball finished, what? My life finished? No, basketball is something that I did. And that taught me a lot for today.
Excellent. Mesna, when you listen to this, when you're building your capabilities in Saudi, what does it tell you about hiring former or current athletes in that mix, and how do you look at the category of athletes in your future leadership?
So we do have actually a dedicated initiative under the umbrella of human capability, and we have the pleasure to have a roundtable, and Dino was with us, one of the international experts. So we have discussed this initiatives, and actually this initiatives is tailoring a top-down approach for athletes as a system. As my Damien mentioned, that we need a system, and we recognize this now in the country, that we need to have a system for athletes to support them transition from their beginning, like the early stages when they are performance. So athletes is not just only focusing on the skills that they have. They have life skills that can transit these skills to any career. As you mentioned, it's just like the leadership, the teamwork, everything. Every employer want to hire these kind of skills, but how can they shape themselves? And this is what we are now designing with the expert to implement these initiatives for our athletes to help them translate to the career, and also taking in our consideration that we need actually to work with different stakeholders. From the government side, from the schools and formal education, to also community, parents, everything can actually play a role in this, transition. And for them to understand, at least themselves, to understand that they are now, this is part of period of their life, as you mentioned, like it's not just they are athletes forever. So, but they have to actually capitalize these skills that they have to transition to a next stage of their life and actually having this impact to the individual and communities. And this is what we need. And if we actually move this in the right way, we will have a great and successful actually transition for the athletes and for the community itself.
It's a win-win. Yesterday I learned the difference between player-student and student-player. Maybe Martin, you want to continue on that?
We've had one mini MBA program for former athletes now for over 10 years. I think the most important lesson that I've learned is the mistake of thinking that all athletes are similar, because it's actually a big difference between individual athletes and team athletes, and between male athletes and female athletes. For example, many of our sort of male athletes that has been in North America, they're very good in accepting their roles in teams, because that's what you learn if you are in a high commercial team. On the other hand, if I take one of our females that works in individual sports, they're actually very good entrepreneurs, because there are no resources. So when they change, they've had to look for their own sponsors their entire life. And as a consequence of the heterogeneity of this group, it's very important to not see it as one group, because then the strategies are not going to be effectful. So it needs to be, our experience is that it needs to be targeted towards different types of segments, in the same way as you have a TV audience, so you have different segments there.
Clear. Interesting. Dino, you want to expand on that from your perspective? You've done a lot of work, you're doing a lot of work with different athletes?
Yeah, but I want to share my story. There was the other one, It was May the 10th of 2014, and I opened the La Gazzetta dello Sport, is our journal, sport journal, the pink one. And I was reading, was kind of a Sunday morning, and say, tonight will be the last game at San Siro of Javier Zanetti as a captain of Inter Milan. And at the end of the article was, he will start a new career as vice president of Inter Milan with a new coach, Professor Dino Ruta. At that moment, I didn't even know him personally. Obviously, I knew him by name, as an Inter fan as well. But in that moment was another turning point. So as a FIFA master director, he wanted to find a place where to practice. And if you know a bit about the story of Javier Zanetti, he's quite famous for the ability to practice even the day of his wedding. So from that moment, I started a journey. And after 2 years, I met in Harlem, in New York, Matteo, that is here, first row. And I was in that moment with my class at Columbia, and some friends from Columbia, American friends, introduced me to Matteo. So 2 Italians introduced by 1 American. And I was there with Ivan Ramiro Cordoba, another Inter player, because we were doing a visit at MBPA. So long story short, there was another turning point, because for 2 years, I've been struggling understanding how to teach to a former player, because it's totally different from a C level, especially for players that never studied before, like you said, Virgil. So in 2 years, I met Matteo. I said, okay, I spent quite a few late nights understanding the different methodology. And he liked this, and at that moment we started a new initiative that also brought, knowing a great person like Damian. So what I learned in this process, first of all, it is important to have a dedicated approach to players. So what I realized that everyone is different, coming back to what you're saying. So instead of inventing courses for players, at a certain point it's good to create opportunities for players and then support the one-on-one path. And I think this is good. Also coming back to what Mesna is saying, I like the concept of athlete's legacy. I think it's the responsibility of the federations, of the sport ecosystem, sport system, core system, to find the resources to educate players, because they are a legacy for the community. I want to conclude saying that one company, 1 week ago, just asked me to do a research project understanding the impact of the community where the elite players, champions, are born and raised. So that's kind of I never thought about it, but if you now think about the Italian tennis player Sinner, yes, he's Italian, but he was born in Bolzano, but that area is benefiting of having Sinner in this moment. So also in this case, I think the link between the player's career and the legacy that they can bring to many stakeholders is still a great area of development.
Thank you, Dino. Time is flying. We're coming to the last round. So we touched we had the general introduction. We talked about the athletes. Now we talk about the sports industry and the whole ecosystem around it. Martin mentioned it, and maybe you want to take this one first. When you say graduates who may want to work in McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, or IKEA, which are very different industries, but somehow they are all in one vision, also on an MBA program. But when it comes to sports, people think this is a different world, and why? So maybe all of you want to expand what makes the sports industry different, and also a little bit what is your vision for the sports industry going forward?
So my vision, having a background in accounting, normally I tell people that one of the reasons I wanted to get into sports is I wanted a little bit more heart. Accounting is a lot about the brain. But now coming into sports, I think it's a lot about adding the brain to the heart. Because I think one of the fascinating thing of the sports world, it's so related with emotions, and sometimes too much emotions. So what's, to me, the whole idea is, how can we combine the heart and the brain? That's the whole idea. And I would actually envision that the sports world, I think, needs to look beyond itself way too much. When I meet both national organizations in Sweden, but also international, they always benchmark with the international leading sport organization. I don't think that's going to be enough to be really interesting. They need to go to other industries, and in Sweden, obviously now, I think it's really interesting what we're seeing with Barcelona and Spotify, for example. The crossroad between music and sports. That type of crossroad, I think, is the future. And I think all sports leaders not only need to, as Dino said, need to think about educating athletes, that's one part, but they need to go to school too, because they have not gone to school. Most of the sports executives I meet, they sort of hardly doesn't have a master degree. And if they want their industry to really be recognized as one of the industries that other industries look upon, because I think sports has that potential, they need to act in the same way as they demand from their players and their coaches. Because that's one of the striking things, that when it comes to the sporting side, people fire people all the time, and they're very harsh. But when it comes to the admin side, it's like, you're the VIP person sitting next to the star. And to me, that culture shift is what it starts with. I call that one performance culture in the entire industry. And I think that's the starting point.
Thank you, Martin. It seems indeed that many rules that apply in all the other industries are thrown overboard when sports comes into play, and the way you recruit, evaluate, promote, etc., etc. But Mesna, for you as the next one up, the specificities of the sports industry and your vision for that same industry.
Well, I just want to expand more on the same things as education is very core to the sport industry. We recognize this, and Leaders Development Institute, where I oversee now, it's been actually established in 1976. With the mission is actually for training and research. So now with the transformation for the vision of 2030 and sport in specific, we recognize this and we have it in our strategy that building capability is part of it. So sport industry needs a lot of building capability, especially in our young country. And we have a lot of investment in this, and we understand this is part of the growing for the sport industry in the region and in Middle East and the world. So beyond that is, and I come back to the education, is not just only a formal education. We tailor different kind of education. So in our institute, we recognize that the especially if we are going from the top level, suits which they're very busy, so we tailor a program, that suits them, and then we go back to the coaches and referees, and then what is the kind of education that they need to have a continuous education. We also have now, we're going to release and launch a new scheme for our licensing and accreditation, and these schemes will give a continuous education CPDs for their licensing and certification. So to renew a certificate, or you have to gain this number of CPDs. And also we understand that education does not come also for the government. Private sectors play a role. So we open and empower the private sector to play a role for providing these CPDs and education. Vocational training is very important. And just like, as I mentioned, formal education, university is part, vocational training is also a bigger part of it. So we understand, we recognize this, and it's part of our strategy to implement, and this is what we
Thank you. That's great. You hopefully bring some fresh blood into the industry. Mm-hmm. Virgil, your view on the industry?
I think that sport is going to be more and more a conscious decision. Like, you have to take your kids to sport. We talked about sport as, Olympics and world champions, but I think sport is a way of educating kids more and more. We need to also focus on active students, not only on high-performance sports, because that's where we take also the high performers. So I think, education for life skills is something that sport does very good in applied lesson. Now, what we do with kids, for example, that we keep them in sport, is offering them for future. Now, education can be online. We have a Spark Generation School, it's called, that, the kid can actually take classes in the bus, in the plane. He can take exams in hotels. It's keeps them up with the work. You better keep up than catch up. Catching up is hard, but keeping up, it's okay. So I think more and more on society we have, that to take the kids out of their chairs, and not only the kids, ourselves as well. So that's why the industry is going to look more and more into organized activity like sport.
Great. Dino, the last wise words are for you to close this panel.
1 minute, but I'll use it in a smart way. My statement is simple. My focus is about coaches. I think sport should raise the bar. If you want to be a coach, you need to have a degree. I say again, you need to have a degree, sports science. Because my little kid, if he goes to school, the PE instructor has a degree. But then if he goes to an academy playing football, basketball, it just has the technical certificate of the federation where a degree is not needed. I think the federation should raise the bar and say, everybody that wants to work in our system has to get a degree. And this will change the entourage since the beginning, and also the approach of players. That since the beginning, they know that if we want to have a future in sport, they need to think about studying. If we, like in public administration, if we want to get a job, we know the degree is necessary. And I think sport is more than that. We say the sport is culture, in theory, when just we see the 5 rings of the Olympics. But in reality, the policies are not there.
Thank you, Dino. Thanks to the panel here for finishing exactly on time. I promise that although we couldn't take questions from the audience, that these brains are with us for the next 48 hours, also outside on a boat or wherever we go. Grab them, talk to them, and exchange, because I think that's the great thing of the festival that Damian has created. It's really an interactive session, and I think that's also part of education. So please, a big round of applause for the panelists.